The last time I checked the wall, there was a new line at the bottom. Nobody had been in that basement but me. I photographed it. I sent it to the only person who'd ever given me a real answer about what the writing meant. She never responded. I called her office. I emailed twice. Her faculty page is still up. Same photo, same bio, same office hours listed. She just stopped existing, as far as I'm concerned. Let me back up. I want to be upfront about who's telling you this, because it matters. I'm a logistics coordinator, 43 years old. I live outside Harlan County, Kentucky, and I have spent my entire adult life believing only in things I can touch. I'm not a person who entertains this kind of story. I am the person who rolls his eyes at this kind of story. That's exactly why this is eating me alive. 3 years ago, November, my wife took the girls to Lexington for Thanksgiving week. I was home alone. We'd been waiting months for a cable technician. Faster internet, nothing exciting. And he was finally scheduled for a Thursday morning. He arrived at 8:47. I remember because I checked my phone. White van, no logo. I thought subcontractor and moved on. He was a big man, large, quiet, the kind of quiet that big people develop when they've learned to take up less space. Gray Carhartt jacket, tool bag. He smiled when I opened the door, a real smile, and I felt completely fine. His name on the work order, Dale. I showed him the rotor in the living room. He went to work. I stayed nearby, not watching him, just present. He was professional, careful. The sounds he made were exactly the sounds a technician makes. About 40 minutes in, he called out, "Sir, I'll need to check your service connection. That usually runs into a basement or utility space." I have a basement. Old house, 1960s build, unfinished concrete, 2 bare bulbs on a pull chain. I took him down, showed him the utility panel, showed him where the main line came through the wall. He nodded, set his bag down, started working. I went back upstairs. Here's the part I'm most ashamed of, and I need you to sit with it the same way I have. I left him down there for almost an hour, not because something was wrong, because a vendor called and I was distracted, and my brain filed Dale in the basement, underhandled and moved on. That's all. That is the most ordinary human thing in this story, and it's the thing that makes everything after it possible. When the call ended, the house was completely quiet. I walked to the basement door, cracked it. Nothing. No movement, no sound. I called down, "Hey Dale, everything okay?" Silence. I went down. The far bulb was on, the one I hadn't pulled. Dale was standing in the far corner with his back to me. Still. Completely still. The way a person stands when they think no one is watching them do something they shouldn't be doing. Tool bag on the floor beside him. Hands at his sides. He wasn't working. "Dale." He turned around. His face was completely normal. That is the detail that has never left me. The total undisturbed normalcy of his expression. He looked like a man who'd been doing a job. "Sorry," he said. "Lost track of time." He picked up his bag. He walked past me. I stepped aside without thinking. My body made that decision. And he went up the stairs, and I stood there alone in the basement. Then I looked at the wall he'd been facing. I thought I would recognize it. The mind does that. Rushes to categorize, to file, to make ordinary. I stepped closer, expecting graffiti, expecting something a kid had done, expecting letters I'd just never noticed before in the corner of a basement I rarely used. It wasn't any of that. The wall was covered in rows of symbols. Dark ink, or something close to ink, careful and deliberate. Long, angular characters arranged in lines the way text is arranged in lines. Not random marks. Something with internal structure, something that suggested a grammar, a sequence, a meaning. No alphabet I have ever seen. Not Russian, not Greek, not Arabic, not anything. And the ink was fresh, not dry fresh, wet fresh. The kind of fresh where, if you pressed your thumb against it, it would smear. I know, because I did. Upstairs, Dale was packing up by the door. He handed me a completion form. I signed it. I watched him drive north on Route 119 until his van went over the ridge and was gone. Then I called the cable company. No record of a Thursday appointment. The work order number wasn't their format. No technician named Dale in the Harlan County service area. All their vehicles are marked. I called back twice. Same answer both times. The form I'd signed was a template, filled in by hand. A deputy came out within the hour. He was older, 20-some years on the job, and he stood in front of that wall longer than felt comfortable. Longer than a man taking notes needs to stand anywhere. I asked him if he recognized the language. He said, whatever wrote this understood what it was writing. He left the whoever out of that sentence, on purpose. I thought about that a long time. They never found Dale. The van had no plates that traced to anything registered in Kentucky. The case is still technically open. Nobody calls me about it. I had 2 people look at the writing. A linguistics professor. Her specialty is constructed and extinct writing systems. And a woman from our church who has spent decades doing mission work across 4 continents. I'm not going to give you their credentials. What matters is what they said. The church woman looked at the wall for a long time. Then she looked at me and said, has anything been wrong with the house? I said, what do you mean wrong? She said, anything that shouldn't be happening. She didn't elaborate. I didn't push. Some doors. Once you start walking toward them, you don't stop. The linguistics professor was more specific. She said the symbol structure suggested an internal grammar. That whoever had written it wasn't just making marks, they were saying something. That it followed rules. That it had the architecture of language without being any language that exists. Then she said something I've been sitting with ever since. She said, the troubling part isn't that it's unknown. Lots of things are unknown. The troubling part is that it's consistent. Whoever did this has done it before. 6 weeks later, she stopped returning my messages. I go down to check the wall every few months. I tell myself it's because I want to document any changes. That's not really why. I go down because I need to know the writing is still there, that I haven't imagined it, that the wet smear of ink on my thumb that November morning was real. It's always the same rows, same careful angular characters, until 14 months ago. There was a new line at the bottom, 3 or 4 characters, same hand, same ink, written below everything that had been there before, as though a sentence had been resumed. I had been the only person in that basement. I photographed it and sent it to the professor. She never responded. I've told you that already. What I haven't told you is that when I zoom in on the photograph, when I look at that new line close up, the characters are different from the ones above them. Not in style, in size. They're slightly smaller, slightly more compressed, like something running out of room. My family still lives in this house. My daughters sleep 40 feet above that basement. My wife knows the story. I've told her everything. And she has decided, the way people decide things they need to survive, that it was a disturbed person with a marker and too much time. I respect that. I choose it too on most days. But I don't go into the basement alone anymore. I didn't make that rule out loud. My body just made it for me one afternoon, and I never argued. And I keep the pull chain on the far bulb tied in a knot, looped around a nail, so that if someone pulls it, so that if the light turns on, I'll know. It hasn't happened yet. I check every morning. The cable works perfectly, by the way. Whatever Dale was, whoever sent him, he got that part right. If you've seen writing like this, the symbols, the rows, the angular characters that follow grammar rules that don't belong to any language, I need to hear from you. I've been alone with this for 3 years. I don't think I'm supposed to be. The last thing Marcus ever said to me was, "Don't look at the one that doesn't move." I didn't know what he meant. I figured it was the sleep deprivation talking. We'd been awake for 31 hours by that point, the 2 of us sitting on the cold dome floor with our backs against the projector housing, waiting for something we couldn't name to either show itself or stop pretending it wasn't already there. I know what he meant now. I wish I didn't. Let me tell you about Marcus before I tell you what happened to him, because that's the part everyone skips, and it's the part that matters most. We'd been together 4 years. We met in a graduate program we both eventually dropped out of. Him for a job at the Halverson Planetarium in Carver Falls, me following 6 months later, because I loved him, and because Carver Falls, Tennessee, on population 4,000, had a surprising number of things going for it if you were the kind of person who needed quiet more than you needed options. Marcus ran the planetarium the way some people tend to garden, with patience and a love that didn't need an audience. The building was old, a 1968 municipal project that had outlasted its funding several times over. The dome leaked in heavy rain. The Spitz projector at the center of the main theater was a mechanical artifact, a sphere of metal and glass that Marcus maintained himself because no one else in the county knew how. He called it the orrery. Not quite the right word, technically, but it was his, and he named it what he wanted. He knew every star in every program by position, by name, by the mythology attached to it across 6 different cultures. He knew which children would gasp at Saturn and which ones would go quiet at the Milky Way. He knew that the best moment in any show wasn't the dramatic reveal of a nebula, but the 2 seconds of total darkness before it. The moment when the audience stopped being an audience and became something smaller and more honest. He was the most precise person I have ever known. So when he started going somewhere else in his head and not telling me where, I noticed immediately. It started in February, about 8 months before everything fell apart. Small things at first. He'd come home from a late session at the Dome and sit at the kitchen table without turning the lights on. Not upset, just still. Somewhere inside himself in a way that didn't invite company. I'd ask how the session went and he'd say, fine, with the specific flatness of someone who has decided fine is enough and isn't open to follow-up questions. He started leaving his notebooks at work, which he had never done. Marcus kept his observation logs the way other people keep diaries, filling them with coordinates and margin notes and small drawings of things he'd seen projected against the dome ceiling. When I asked about them, he said he was keeping them at the planetarium because that's where the work was. I believed him. I want to be honest about that. I believed him every single time. In March, he started going back at night. Not unusual for his job. There were maintenance windows, calibration sessions, things that needed to happen when the building was empty. But the frequency crept up on me. Once a week became twice. And twice became every other night. He'd leave after dinner, come home after midnight, sleep a few hours, wake up already somewhere else. I asked him directly one night, "Is something wrong with the projector?" He paused just long enough for it to mean something. He said, "The projector is fine. It's the program that's wrong." I asked what he meant. He said, "Something keeps appearing that isn't in the program." I should have pushed harder. I know that now. I should have sat him down and made him tell me everything instead of accepting the half answers he gave me, like he was trying to protect me from something he hadn't figured out yet. That was Marcus. He didn't share problems. He shared solutions. He would have come to me when he had it worked out. He never got to work it out. What I know now, I got from going back. From his notebooks, the ones I found when I finally went to the planetarium 9 days after he disappeared. In the desk drawer he'd told me held calibration equipment, in a folder labeled Program Errors, in handwriting that got smaller and more compressed as the months went on. The first entry was dated February 14th, Valentine's Day. I've decided not to read anything into that. Anomaly during Orion segment. Single point source, stationary, approximately 4 degrees south of Betelgeuse. Not in star catalog, not in program file. Checked equipment. No physical obstruction on lens array. Point source present for 11 minutes, then absent. Then more entries. Same point source. Different position each session. Always stationary while everything else tracked in the programmed arc. Always present for 8 to 14 minutes. We'd always gone without the equipment showing any change. By April, the tone had shifted. It was in the Pleiades cluster tonight. 7 visible sisters plus 1. Same behavior, stationary while cluster tracks. I've started calling it the understory. I don't know where that word came from. It arrived fully formed, and it feels right. By June, the understory was in Cassiopeia. I watched it for the full duration. I've started to feel, and I know this isn't scientific language, that it watches back. By August, the handwriting had changed. Still his, but cramped, the letters pressed close together like he was trying to fit more on the page than the page was meant to hold. I've been trying to find out if anyone else can see it. I ran 3 public sessions this week and watched the audience during the understory window. Children notice. Not all of them. Specific children, the ones who go still instead of pointing, who don't whisper to each other, who just stop. I don't know what the stillness means yet. I went to the planetarium on day 9. I want to tell you I went because I was worried. The true answer is I went because I was angry. Because the police had been politely skeptical, and the building was unlocked, and I was 34 years old, and the person I loved had been gone for 9 days, and I needed to do something with my hands besides wait. The side entrance was open. Marcus always left it unlocked during the day on the theory that anyone determined to break into a small-town planetarium deserved whatever they found inside. The lobby was ordinary. Exhibit panels, the small gift case, the smell of the old carpet we'd been trying to get the city council to replace for 2 years. His jacket was on the hook by the inner door. His good jacket, the one he wore for public programs, the one I'd bought him for his birthday 3 years ago. 40 degrees outside. He would not have left without that jacket. The police had noted it. I don't know what they did with the noting. I went into the dome. The orrery was on, not running a program. Just on its operational light glowing amber in the dark, the sphere of it sitting at the center of the room like a small planet. The dome above was fully dark. The real dark, the kind Marcus had described to me once as the truest darkness most people ever get to sit inside. No exit signs, no emergency strips, nothing. The dome just took everything in and gave nothing back. I stood in the doorway for a moment. Then I sat down on the floor, cross-legged, back against the wall, the way Marcus had told me audiences sometimes sat when they wanted to feel the dome rather than just watch it. I don't know how long I sat there before I reached over and started up the basic program, the one that begins with local horizon and walks you through the visible sky. The dome filled with stars. I've seen this program maybe 50 times. I know it the way I know the layout of our house, by feel, by the comfortable knowledge of what comes next. The arc of Orion rising, the Pleiades, the river of the Milky Way stretching overhead. 15 minutes in, during the Orion segment, I saw it. A single point of light, stationary, south of Betelgeuse, just like the notebook said. On everything else in the dome was moving in its programmed arc. This was not. I stared at it long enough to be completely sure, the way you make yourself sure of something. You know you'll have to defend later, so you look longer than you need to, building the memory on purpose. Then I felt it. Not with my eyes. It was more like a change in the room, the way the air in a space shifts when the balance of who is watching and who is being watched tips the wrong way. The feeling you get as a kid when you look into a dark hallway and understand, without any evidence at all, that the dark has noticed you back. I stopped breathing. The light moved. Not with the programmed sky. Not in any arc I recognized. It moved in a slow, straight, deliberate line across the dome. And as it moved, 3 stars directly in its path went dark. Not dim. Not flickering. Just gone. Like something passing between the projector and the dome surface. Something inside the room. In the room with me. I left. I'm not embarrassed by that. I went through the side door fast and stood in the parking lot under real sky and breathed for a long time before. I called the detective on Marcus's case. I told him everything. The light, the motion, the 3 stars going dark in sequence. I told him about the notebooks. I'd photographed every page before leaving. I told him Marcus had been tracking this for 8 months. He came out the next morning. He walked the dome. He found nothing. He read the notebooks, and he was kind about it. The way people are kind when they've quietly decided they're dealing with grief, and not with information. He told me the case was still open, and he gave me the card of a grief counselor. Here is the thing I didn't tell him. When the light moved across the dome, when I watched it block out those 3 stars, I counted the ones it didn't touch, the ones that stayed visible along its whole path. There were 7 stars in that cluster, and one that never moved at all. I've checked 3 different star catalogs since. I've run the Orion segment in 2 other planetarium software programs. I've asked astronomers to verify the position. There is no star there. There has never been a star there. It's there every time I run the program now. Same position, same faint still light. And I figured out on my 4th visit, sitting in the completely dark dome for 20 minutes before touching the projector, that it was already there before the program started. A single point in the darkness above the empty housing. The program doesn't make it. The program just makes it easier to see. Marcus's final notebook entry. Inside back cover, written so small I needed my phone flashlight to read it. The program doesn't create it. The program just makes it visible. It was here before the dome. It will be here after. I think it's been here since. The sentence stops there. His jacket is still on the hook by the inner door. I haven't moved it. I'm not sure I can explain why. Some mix of wanting to preserve things as they were, and the feeling, which I know is not rational, that moving it would close a door I'm not ready to close. I go back once a week. I sit on the dome floor with my back against the wall, and I watch the program run, and I watch the one that doesn't move. I'm not afraid of it the way I was that first night. Whether that's because I've gotten used to it, or because something in me has changed in a way I haven't fully caught up to yet, I genuinely don't know. What I am is paying attention. Marcus taught me that. You watch the thing that stays still while everything else moves. Not because you'll understand it, just because the watching is the only honest thing left to do. It has been seen. I think maybe that's what it needed. I think Marcus figured that out. I think that's why he went. If you run a planetarium, anywhere, any size, any equipment, do this. Run your standard program. Find your first deep sky segment. Before you look at what moves, look for what doesn't. If you find a stationary point with no catalog number, no program entry, no explanation from your equipment, don't try to name it. Don't report it to your director. Just write down the exact coordinates and get them to me. I've been mapping the positions across every account I can find. The locations aren't random. There's a pattern forming, and I'm close to seeing what it is. Marcus was close too. I'm trying to finish what he started before whatever happened to him happens to me. I want to be careful about how I tell this story, not because I'm afraid you won't believe me. I've stopped caring about that. I want to be careful because the way you say something changes what it does to the person hearing it. And I've spent the last 8 months thinking about the exact order of events, trying to figure out which detail was the moment I should have known, which detail would have saved me. I still don't have an answer, but I'm going to give you every piece in the right order and let you sit with it the way I had to. My sister set it up. She kept saying he was normal. That word, normal. She used it 3 times in one conversation, which in retrospect was the first warning I ignored. You don't reassure someone that a person is normal unless something about them has made you doubt it. But my sister loved me. Oh, I know she did. So I went. The town wasn't far, just far enough. The kind of place where one gas station doubles as the post office, and everyone waves at your car even if they've never seen it before. There was a restaurant on the main road, the only restaurant really. And that's where we were meeting. Outdoors, public, safe. That part mattered to me. I told people where I was going. I had a check-in plan. I did everything right. I want you to hold that. He arrived before me, which I remember noticing and feeling good about. Punctuality used to mean something to me. He was sitting at the corner table, the one tucked under the overhang, where the yellow bulb was flickering slightly, and when he stood to greet me, he was, I'll say it, Completely unremarkable. The face you'd lose in a crowd inside 10 seconds. Not unkind. Not threatening. There. We talked for maybe 40 minutes. He was a decent conversationalist. He asked questions. Real ones. The kind that show someone was listening to your last sentence before they formed their next. I remember thinking, okay, she was right. This is fine. I remember relaxing. That's the part that stays with me at night. The relaxing. The first thing I noticed, and I mean noticed in the way your body notices before your brain catches up, was his stillness. Not the stillness of someone who is calm. The stillness of something that has learned to imitate calm. There's a difference. One comes from the inside. The other is a posture worn over something else entirely. He never blinked at the wrong time. That sounds strange. I know it sounds strange. But you spend enough time around people and you start to understand the rhythm of a face, the micro movements, the unconscious adjustments, the tiny resets that happen when someone gets uncomfortable or pleased or distracted. He had all of them. They were just slightly off tempo, like a song being played at 94% speed. You might not notice right away, but something in you does. I excused myself to use the restroom, and I stood at the sink with the water running, and I thought, what is wrong with you? He hasn't done anything. I went back out. It was after the second drink. Mine, not his. He hadn't touched his since it arrived. That he said something that I've replayed so many times, it's lost shape in my memory, like a word you repeat until it becomes noise. And he said, "You seem like the kind of person no one would believe." He said it lightly, conversationally, like it was a compliment. And in the moment I laughed. I actually laughed, because I was in a public place with yellow light and other tables nearby, and I told myself he meant something else, something harmless. But he watched me laugh, and he didn't laugh with me. He just observed it, like he was recording something. I left shortly after. I drove the long route home because I didn't want to think about why I was taking the long route home. I called my sister from the car and told her it was fine, but probably not a second date. She asked why, and I said I couldn't explain it, and she said, "Was he weird?" And I said no. And that was the truest and most unsettling answer I've ever given. He wasn't weird. That's what I keep coming back to. He was calibrated. The thing that happened 3 weeks later is harder to explain. Not because it was dramatic. It wasn't at first. But because it required me to accept something that all my sensible, reasonable, normal ways of seeing the world had no room for. I started finding small things in my apartment that had been moved. Not taken, not broken, moved. A glass relocated 4 inches to the left. A book face down when I leave all my books face up. A window latch I never touched. I told myself I was tired. I told myself I'd done it myself and forgotten. I told myself all the things you tell yourself when the alternative explanation requires you to restructure your entire understanding of what is possible. I told no one, partly because who would I tell, and partly because I heard his voice in my head, the kind of person no one would believe. And I couldn't shake the feeling that he'd already known this would be my problem, that this was the architecture of it, that the isolation was the method. I looked him up. There wasn't much, which is its own kind of data point. In this era, an absence of footprint is an act of will. There were no reviews of him, no social media, no photos that dated back more than 2 years, just enough to pass a surface check, just enough for someone like my sister to say, he seems normal. I found one thing, a forum post, old, archived, barely indexed, from a different town, about 2 hours north of where I lived. A woman describing a date, the stillness, the specific stillness. And a line so close to what he'd said to me that I had to put my phone face down on the table and sit with my hands flat on my knees until I could breathe normally. She'd stopped posting 4 months later. No explanation, just stopped. I'm not going to tell you what I think he was, not because I don't have a theory, but because naming it makes it smaller than it is, and it's not small. What I'll tell you is what the evidence suggests when you line it up. He found people who were already half convinced the world wouldn't take their side. He inserted himself into the natural architecture of their doubt. He learned, probably over years of practice, exactly how to present as unremarkable. And whatever he did after, whether it was presence or surveillance, or something that doesn't fit inside the vocabulary I have for human behavior, he did it in the gap between what is provable and what is real, the gap that exists in everyone's life, the gap he'd already measured in mine. I moved. I know that sounds like a dramatic response to ambiguous evidence. I've made my peace with that. I have better locks now. I have a dog now, which I always wanted anyway, so I refuse to give him credit for that one. I'm more careful about who I find unremarkable. That's probably the most useful thing I've taken from all of this. Unremarkable is not the same as safe. The absence of red flags is not the presence of green ones. Some things have learned that the most effective camouflage is looking like nothing at all. There's one last thing. About 2 months after I moved, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. No area code I knew, just 4 words. You seem like someone. I screenshotted it. I sent it to 2 people I trust. I told them exactly what it meant to me and exactly why. I'm telling you now, too, because if there's anything this experience has taught me, if there's a single lesson carved out of all of it, it's that the only thing that makes the gap smaller is refusing to stand in it alone. Stay in the light. Check your latches. And if someone tells you that you seem like the kind of person no one would believe yourself first. The receipt is the only thing I have left. $6.40. Timestamp, 4:38 p.m. A diner that, according to every county record, every property database, and every person I have spoken to since, has been closed for 11 years. I have it in a plastic sleeve in my desk drawer. I take it out sometimes and hold it, and remind myself that I am not losing my mind, that something happened on that Tuesday in March that I cannot explain, cannot prove, and cannot stop thinking about. The recording would have changed everything. 18 minutes after I made it, my phone died. Not low battery. I had 61% when I walked out of that building. It shut off completely. The way phones shut off when something catastrophic happens to the software. By the time the deputy got it restarted at the side of the highway, the camera roll had been wiped back to factory. Not the recording. Everything. 4 years of photographs. Gone. I'm not saying something supernatural deleted my evidence. I'm saying someone somehow knew it existed and had 20 minutes and the right access to make sure it didn't anymore. In 2024, that is not impossible. That is the part that frightens me more than anything else I'm about to tell you. I'm a sales rep, commercial kitchen equipment. I've driven more 2-lane highways in rural America than I can count. Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas, the long flat stretches of Mississippi where the radio loses signal and the GPS stops pretending. I know roadside diners the way a mailman knows front doors. I have eaten in hundreds of them. I've never been afraid of one. Until this. The road was a county shortcut I'd used years before. Habit, not decision. No signal. Hungry since a granola bar at the trade show that morning. The sign came up on my right the way these signs do, set back from the highway, hand-painted, red letters on whiteboard, not trying too hard. The parking lot was gravel. 3 cars. A screen door that slapped shut behind me when I walked in. Everything about it was correct. I need you to hold on to that word. Correct, because it is the most frightening thing I will say in this entire account. Not strange. Not off. Correct. The smell of coffee and fryer oil. 4 booths along the window. A counter with stools. A woman behind it who looked up and said, "Sit anywhere." Han, without breaking whatever she'd been doing. I sat at the counter. She brought coffee before I asked. The soup she recommended was genuinely, unremarkably good. There was one other customer I could see. Older man in a booth by the window, working through pie with the focused quiet of someone who eats alone regularly, a cook visible through the pass-through, back turned, a radio somewhere in the back playing something I couldn't quite identify. I was 11 minutes in when I heard the knock. From below the floor, one knock, slow and deliberate. Not a pipe expanding, not a settling beam. Those sounds have a randomness to them, a structural irregularity. This was intentional. This was the sound of something that understood cause and effect. I looked up. The woman behind the counter had her back to me. She didn't react. The man in the booth didn't look up from his pie. I looked back at the floor. 2 knocks, same pace, same weight. The woman turned around and caught my eyes on the floorboards. Her face did nothing. That is the precise clinical truth of it. Not a flinch, not a flicker, not the micro-expression of someone caught. Just a face in neutral watching me. She said, "Building settles in the cold. Pay it no mind." She refilled my coffee. I paid my bill. I left a decent tip because that is what I do, because my brain was still running its normal social scripts even while something underneath was screaming. I was 3 steps from my car when I realized I'd left my phone on the counter. I went back inside. She was gone from behind the counter. The old man was gone from the booth. The cook was not visible through the pass-through. Every light was on. The radio was still playing. My phone sat exactly where I'd left it, and the diner was as empty as a room someone had just walked out of. That specific quality of absence that still holds the shape of presence. Then I saw the door. Narrow. Wood. Painted the same forgettable beige as the wall beside it. Set into the frame like it had been designed to go unnoticed, which I now believe it had. Open maybe 4 inches. From behind it, a sound. I want to be accurate about this because I think accuracy is the only thing I have. It was not a scream. It was not a word. It was the sound a human voice makes at its minimum. The signal a living thing produces when language is no longer available to it. Faint. Continuous. Exhausted in a way that suggested it had been continuous for a long time. I want to tell you I'm a brave person. I'm not, particularly. What I am is a father. My daughter was 7 years old at the time, and that sound activated something that bypassed every rational calculation I might otherwise have made. I opened the door because my body had already decided before my mind got a vote. But I was not stupid about it. I opened my camera app first. I hit record. Then I went through the door. Stone stairs going down. Cold air. The sealed mineral cold of underground spaces that haven't been ventilated in years. A single incandescent bulb at the bottom, throwing yellow light onto a room larger than the building above, had any right to contain. Wine racks along 2 walls. Mostly empty, a few dusty bottles like evidence of a previous life. Concrete floor, the smell of old stone and something organic I chose not to identify. In the far corner, a woman, sitting on the floor back against the rack, knees pulled up, arms wrapped around herself. Fully dressed, jeans, a flannel shirt. No visible injuries, but her wrists were raw in the way skin gets when it has spent time against something rigid. She looked up when the light from the doorway reached her. The look on her face was not relief. It was the expression of someone who had passed through relief so many times it had worn smooth. Who was operating on something older and more desperate than hope. She said, "You have to go. Right now. Do not tell them you saw me." I said, "Who?" She looked past me at the stairs. I turned around. The owner was at the top of the stairs. Still. Dish towel over her shoulder. Reading glasses pushed up on her head. She was looking down at me with an expression I have spent 8 months trying to name and can only describe as administrative. The expression of someone managing a situation they have managed before. She didn't speak. She didn't move toward me. She stood at the top of the stairs and waited. And the waiting itself was the threat. The absolute, unhurried certainty of someone who knew how this played out. I looked back at the woman on the floor. She was shaking her head slowly, and the fear on her face had sharpened into something specific. Not fear of the woman on the stairs, but fear of what would happen if I tried to help her. Fear for me, not for herself. That distinction is the one that has never let me go. Here's what I did. I'm not proud of the specifics, and I'm not going to dress them up. I went up those stairs with my back against the wall so she couldn't get behind me, my phone still recording. My eyes on her hands the entire way up. She was bigger than me. Older, but solid in the way people who have done physical work their whole lives are solid. I had no weapon and no backup and no plan beyond getting past her. She stepped aside. Not quickly. Slowly. Deliberately. The way a person steps aside when they are choosing to. When the stepping aside is itself a message. I went past her close enough to feel the air move, and I walked across that diner floor, and I hit the screen door, and I did not run to my car because running would have meant turning my back, and I did not turn my back until I had the car door locked. She stood in the diner doorway and watched me leave. That was the worst part. Not the chase that didn't come, the watching. I was a quarter mile down the highway before I looked at my phone. 61% battery. The recording was there. I could see the thumbnail, the timestamp, 22 seconds. I called 911, told them what I had, gave them my location. I watched my phone for the next 18 minutes while I waited on the shoulder. At the 16-minute mark, it shut off. No warning, no low battery screen. Off. The deputy tried to restart it for 4 minutes at the side of the road. When it came back on, the camera roll was empty. Not just the recording, everything. Factory default. The phone had been remotely wiped while it sat in my hand on a rural Tennessee highway with no Wi-Fi and marginal cell signal. I am not a tech person. I have since spoken to 2 people who are. Both of them told me a remote wipe on a modern smartphone is possible. It is a feature that exists that can be triggered, but that it requires either a logged-in account with remote access enabled or someone with the right tools and the right access operating within range. Neither of them could explain the battery shutoff. Neither of them tried very hard to. The deputy took my full statement. He was professional. He processed the phone as evidence. He sent a unit to the location I described. The unit found a diner vacant since 2013. Structural damage at the rear. Cellar access points sealed. One with concrete, one with a padlocked steel plate, both showing years of weathering. No woman matching the description in any missing persons report within 100 miles. No active ownership on county record. 2 weeks later, the deputy called to tell me the case was being filed as unverified. Before he hung up, he said, "The receipt. Don't lose it." Just that. I started to ask him what he meant, and he said he had to go, and that was the last time I heard from him. I went back once. Sunday. Full daylight, 2 months later. The building is real. The sign, the counter inside, the 4 booths, the pass-through. Everything layered in the specific gray dust of genuine abandonment. Not theatrical, not staged. The real thing. The narrow door beside the counter. Still there. Still beige. Locked now, padlocked from the outside with a hasp that had been recently installed. The screw heads still bright. No surface rust. Someone had been back between my visit and mine. I knocked on it. From the outside, silence. I looked at the floor in front of it. The dust had been disturbed in a rough arc. The sweep pattern of a door that had been opened and closed repeatedly over years, worn into the grain. And at the base of the door, just visible at the bottom edge, scratches in the wood. Long, shallow, parallel. The kind of marks made from the other side. Too many for one person. Too many for one occasion. I stood there for a long time. I did not try to open the padlock. I did not call out. I took photographs, which exist on a backup drive that is not connected to any account that can be remotely accessed. I learned that lesson. And then I left, because the woman on the stairs had let me go once, and I did not trust that the offer was still open. I think about the woman in the cellar every day. I think about her raw wrists and the specific quality of her fear when she looked past me at the stairs, how she was afraid for me, not for herself, how that fear suggested she had watched this sequence before. Someone else going down. Someone else coming back up. Someone else leaving. I think about the owner at the top of the stairs and her administrative patience and the way she stepped aside with the deliberateness of a choice. I think about what it means that she let me go and what she understood about the consequences that I didn't. I think about who wiped my phone. I think about the fact that doing so required knowing the phone existed, knowing it contained a recording, and having the access and capability to act within 18 minutes on a rural highway. That is not a ghost. That is infrastructure. That is organization. That is the part that keeps me awake. Not what I saw in that basement, but what it implies about who is watching the road above it. I have a receipt. I have photographs of a padlock and scratches. I have a phone with a verified remote wipe event that neither I nor two technicians can fully explain. I have the memory of a woman on a floor who was afraid for me. Somewhere on a 2-lane highway in rural Tennessee, there's a diner with 3 cars in the gravel lot and a screen door that slaps shut behind you, and a woman who will bring you coffee before you ask for it, and everything about it will be exactly, precisely, suffocatingly correct. If you have stopped there, if you have a receipt with a timestamp that contradicts what you were later told, I need the specific road, not your story, not your fear, the road, because there are scratches on that floor from more than one set of hands, and I am no longer willing to pretend I am the only one who made it back to the highway. The call came in at 1:48 a.m., not an alarm, a discrepancy. The system logged it the way it logged everything, quietly, without opinion. Weight sensor in the large mammal unit was reading wrong. Could be a calibration drift. Could be the overnight humidity. Kevin had seen it before. He grabbed his jacket off the back of the chair. His coffee was still hot. He left it. The parking lot was empty except for his truck and a city maintenance vehicle that had been parked in the same spot for 11 days. He'd started to think of it as furniture. The east entrance took his key card on the 3rd try. It always did in cold weather. He made a mental note to report it, and knew, the same way he always knew, that he wouldn't. The path to the large mammal unit was about 200 meters. He'd walked it so many times that his feet did it without him, and he was thinking about his daughter's soccer game on Saturday, whether he could swap his Friday shift to make it work, whether his supervisor would answer a text at 1:52 in the morning. He was thinking about none of the right things. He smelled it before he saw it. Not blood. Not something dead. Something alive. A musk he couldn't name, heavy and close, the kind of smell that sits at the back of your throat. He'd been working here long enough to know that smell meant proximity. It meant something large was nearby and recently moved. He stopped. The unit door was open, not broken. The frame was intact. The lock mechanism was undamaged. He checked it twice because his brain needed him to check it twice. The door had been opened correctly, the latch depressed, the handle turned. The way you open a door when you know how doors work. And he stood there for a moment that he still can't accurately measure. His radio worked. That part, at least. He got dispatch on the 2nd try and told them what he was looking at. The woman on the other end asked him to confirm the unit number. He confirmed it. She said she was sending a patrol. He asked how long. She said maybe 20 minutes. He looked at the open door. He looked at the dark inside it. He took 3 steps back and put his shoulder against the perimeter fence, and he waited. And he did not use his flashlight, and he did not go inside, and he did not do any of the things that people in these situations do in stories. He just stood there in the dark with the smell and the open door and the specific sound of something very large breathing somewhere he couldn't see. 18 minutes, he counted them, was the patrol car came in through the service entrance. 2 officers. One of them had worked animal control before. She walked the perimeter with a confidence Kevin didn't have and didn't pretend to have. The other one stood with him and didn't say much. At some point, one of them asked if he was okay. He said he wasn't sure yet. That was honest. The investigation found what it found. The weight discrepancy the sensor had been logging wasn't a calibration drift. It had been logging correctly for 43 consecutive nights. The same unit, the same window, the same inexplicable reading that someone had looked at every Tuesday morning and filed under monitor and review. The door showed no signs of forced entry from outside. The internal latch mechanism showed significant wear, the kind of wear that comes from repeated deliberate use. The enclosure hadn't been opened from the outside. Kevin still works the overnight shift. Different facility now, different city. He checks the weight sensors himself every night before he does anything else. He's never found another discrepancy. He's also never stopped looking. I don't usually talk about this, not because I think people won't believe me. I stopped caring about that a long time ago. I talk about it because if I don't, it just sits there behind my eyes every time I'm driving somewhere alone at night. And I've learned that saying it out loud, even to strangers, makes it weigh a little less. This happened on a Tuesday. That's the part nobody ever asks about, but I always mention, because Tuesday is the most meaningless day of the week. Nothing happens on a Tuesday. You don't remember Tuesdays. You don't plan for something to go wrong on a Tuesday. You just drive. I was heading back from a work thing. Nothing dramatic. A meeting that ran long. A bad cup of coffee. The kind of afternoon that disappears from memory the moment it ends. I took the longer route because I'd taken the highway that morning, and I was tired of the highway. That's it. That's the whole reason. I was tired of the same road. I wanted something different. I want you to remember that. I chose the back road because I was bored. Florida back roads at dusk have a specific quality that I've never heard anyone describe correctly. It's not dark yet, but the light is wrong. Everything looks slightly overexposed, too green, too flat, the sky doing something pale and strange above the tree line. The road is straight for so long that your eyes stop processing it as a road and start processing it as a background. Like a screensaver. Like your brain decided nothing important would happen here and quietly stopped paying attention. My phone was at 62%. I remember because I'd checked it at a red light before I turned off the main road. I had a podcast running, something about true crime, ironically enough, and the AC was doing that thing where it works fine, but you can still feel the heat pressing in from outside like the car is just barely winning an argument with the weather. 40 minutes in, the car started pulling. Not dramatically. Not a blowout. Not a grinding noise. Nothing cinematic. Just a gentle, persistent lean to the right, like the road itself was inviting me to stop. I pumped the brakes once out of instinct. The lean continued. I pulled over. I sat there for a moment with the engine running and the podcast still talking, and I just looked at the road ahead of me, which was empty, which was straight, which went on until it disappeared into that pale, wrong sky. And then I turned off the podcast. Then I turned off the engine. The silence was immediate and total in the way that Florida silence is. Not quiet exactly, but filled with a kind of insect noise that somehow makes you feel more alone than actual silence would. I got out to check the tire. It was the rear right. Flat, fully flat, sitting on the rim like it had given up hours ago. I stood there, looking at it with my hands on my hips, the way people do when they're assessing something they already know they can't fix, and then I reached into my pocket for my phone. No signal. I walked to the front of the car. No signal. I walked to the back of the car. No signal. I held the phone above my head, which is a thing people do even though no one has ever explained why we believe height helps. No signal. My eye stood on the actual road and turned a full, slow circle, holding my phone out like an offering. Flat fields on both sides. Tree line about 100 meters to the east. The road going straight in both directions until it didn't. One bar appeared, flickered, and left. I got back in the car and locked the door. I don't know why I locked the door. Nothing had happened. There was nothing outside. I just locked it, and then I sat with my hands in my lap and listened to the insects and told myself to think clearly. The smart thing was to wait. Someone would come down this road eventually. It was a back road, not an abandoned road. People used it. I'd get a signal eventually, or a car would pass, and everything would be fine by 9 o'clock, and I'd tell this story at work tomorrow as a minor inconvenience. That's what I told myself. And I almost believed it. The light finished dying about 20 minutes later. I'd been watching it go the whole time, that pale sky deepening through orange into something bruised, and then just dark. My headlights were on, cutting a white corridor into the nothing ahead of me. I had the doors locked and the windows up, and my phone open to a text I couldn't send, and I was fine. I was completely fine. Then I saw the shape. It was at the very edge of the headlight range, maybe 80 meters out, standing just off the right side of the road where the asphalt met the grass. At first, I processed it as a deer. That's what you do. You see a shape at the edge of light, and your brain reaches for the most harmless available explanation and hands it to you quickly, gift-wrapped. Deer. Fine. Normal. But deer move. They either bolt or they freeze with that reflective eye shine, that twin flash of orange or green. This shape did neither. It stood with its back to me, and it was the wrong shape for a deer. Wrong proportions, wrong height, wrong stillness. I turned on my high beams. The shape didn't react. I held my hand over the horn for a long moment, without pressing it. Some instinct I couldn't name told me not to make noise, told me that making noise would be the wrong kind of invitation. I sat there with my palm hovering over the horn and watched the shape, and the shape stood at the edge of my light and faced away from me and did not move. I checked my phone. 1 bar, then nothing. When I looked back up, the shape was closer. I hadn't seen it move. That's the part I keep coming back to, the part that made me feel like the ground had shifted under me even though I was sitting still. I had looked down for 3 seconds, maybe 4, and when I looked back up, the shape was closer. Not dramatically closer, maybe 10 meters, but closer. Still facing away. I started the car. The engine turned over, and I sat there in drive with my foot on the brake and my eyes on the shape, and I made a decision that I have gone over 10,000 times since. I decided not to drive forward. The shape was between me and whatever was ahead. I decided to reverse, slowly, back the way I'd come, and find a driveway or a turnoff and face the car around. I took my foot off the brake. I looked in the rearview mirror to check the road behind me. There was a second shape standing directly behind the car, also facing away. I have no memory of the next few seconds. This is not a dramatic device. I genuinely have no access to what happened between seeing that shape in the mirror and finding myself 3 miles down the road with the blown tire shredded completely off the rim, sparks in my mirror, driving on bare metal at 60 miles an hour until the road bent left, and a gas station appeared like something I had invented. The attendant came outside when he heard the noise. I got out of the car and I stood in the fluorescent light, and I said nothing for what he later told me was almost a full minute. He asked if I was all right. I said I'd had car trouble on the back road. He looked at me for a moment, and then he looked at my car, and then he looked back at me, and he said, "Which back road?" I told him. He nodded slowly, in the way someone nods when they've heard something they were hoping not to hear. He didn't ask any follow-up questions. He just went inside and came back with a paper cup of water and set it on the hood of my car without a word. I've thought about that nod for 2 years. I got a tow. I got a ride. I got home at midnight and sat in my lit kitchen and didn't sleep. In the morning, I went back through my phone. The photos I'd taken earlier that day, timestamps, nothing unusual. But I'd also had my phone out on the road when I was checking for signal. And I do this thing sometimes where I take photos without meaning to, just accidentally pressing the button while I'm holding it. I had 3 accidental photos from the road. 2 were just the ground, asphalt, my shoe at the edge. The third one was angled up and toward the road ahead, taken at the moment I was holding the phone above my head searching for signal. This was before I had seen anything, before the light died, before all of it. The shape was already there in that photo, standing at the edge of the tree line, already facing away, already waiting. I had walked within 30 feet of it getting back into my car, and I never saw it. Because I wasn't looking at the tree line. I was looking at my phone. I still remember the smell of that classroom. Chalk dust, old wood, something underneath, something chemical, sharp, like a lab that never quite aired out. Room 14 at Harlow Creek High School sat at the far end of the east corridor, away from the cafeteria noise, away from the gym, away from everything. Most students avoided it even between classes. Nobody could tell you why. Nobody had the words for it yet. We just called it Mr. Voss's room, and we said it quietly. He arrived in Harlow Creek the September I turned 16. New teacher, small town. That alone made him the most interesting thing to happen to Delray County, Kentucky, in about a decade. He drove a clean black sedan that looked wrong on our gravel roads. He wore pressed shirts when every other teacher wore polos. He remembered every student's name by the second day. Not just our names, our details. "Your father works the night shift at the mill, right, Tyler?" he said to the kid in the back row, first week of school. Not asked. Stated, like he'd done homework. Tyler just nodded, blinking. We all thought it was impressive. That's the thing nobody tells you about psychopaths. The first thing they make you feel is seen, chosen, special. It's not creepy at first. It feels like sunlight. It feels exactly like that. The trouble started in October, the way trouble always starts in Harlow Creek. Slowly, then all at once. Cassie Morrow stopped coming to school. Her locker stayed decorated with the little paper sunflowers she'd taped up on the first day. Her lunch table stayed half empty. The guidance counselor said she'd transferred. Her parents, people said, had moved suddenly. Job opportunity, family emergency, something. The story changed depending on who you asked. Mr. Voss expressed his concern in homeroom. Shook his head. Said it was a shame. He said it looking directly at me. I didn't sleep well that night. I told myself it was nothing. The furnace in our house was old, and it knocked and rattled all through October, this hollow clang, 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 at 3 a.m. that my dad said was just the pipe settling. I lay in the dark and listened to it and thought about the way Mr. Voss's eyes didn't move when he smiled. Most people's eyes crinkle. His didn't. They just stayed level. Patient, like a camera lens adjusting its focus. The night everything broke open, it was November. First real freeze of the year. I'd stayed late after school for the Science Olympiad prep. Mr. Voss's extra credit session, which half the junior class attended because rumor had it, he handed out near-perfect recommendation letters. The building emptied out around 5. The janitor, Mr. Briggs, waved at me from down the hall and said goodnight. Then I was alone with him. Not the first time. Should have been nothing. He was at his desk reviewing papers when I packed my bag. The fluorescent light above his desk flickered once, twice, that long yellow hesitation. And in that half-second of dimness, I saw something on his desk that made my brain stall entirely. A photograph, face down. But I recognized the corner of it. The paper sunflowers. Little yellow paper sunflowers. Cassie's. "You're still here," he said, without looking up. My hand tightened on my backpack strap. "Just heading out." "Of course." He set his pen down, folded his hands. "Be careful on Route 9. Deer come out this time of year. Lots of accidents." He still hadn't looked up. He was telling the desk, telling the paper. I walked out of that room, and I did not run. Running felt like the wrong thing to do. Running felt like telling him something he wanted to know. That I'd seen the photograph, that something had clicked into place behind my eyes. I walked at normal speed down the empty corridor, past the dark gymnasium, past the trophy case with its 30 years of Harlow Creek victories frozen under glass. Outside, the cold hit like a wall. My breath came out in a cloud. I reached for my phone to call my mom. No signal. Harlow Creek sat in a valley. Signal was always bad near the school. I'd walk 50 yards toward the road and get 2 bars. I started walking. The parking lot was empty except for 2 cars, mine and Mr. Voss's black sedan, and a third car I didn't recognize. A truck backed into the far corner of the lot with its headlights off. Just sitting there, engine idling. I could see the faint exhaust trail in the frozen air. I looked at my phone. Still no signal. I started walking faster. I didn't make it to my car. Not because anything physically stopped me. Because the truck door opened, and the person who stepped out was Deputy Carl Hauser, the school resource officer, the man who'd been at Harlow Creek for 11 years, the man who'd coached my brother's little league team, the man my mother trusted enough to call in an emergency. "Hey, kiddo," he said, casual, both hands in his jacket pockets. "Mr. Voss called. Said you seemed upset. Wanted to make sure you got home safe." Mr. Voss called. Mr. Voss, who was still inside, who hadn't touched his phone once in the 30 seconds between my leaving and Deputy Hauser appearing in a dark parking lot. Time does something strange in moments like that. It gets very slow and very clear, the way water gets clear right before a storm stirs up the silt. I remembered the exact crunch of gravel under my sneakers, the exact temperature of the air, the way Deputy Hauser's breath came out in slow, even clouds. Too slow, too even, like a man making a deliberate effort to appear relaxed. I looked at him, he looked at me, and I understood, the whole architecture of it suddenly, all at once, that there was no version of this where I got in that truck. I ran. I don't remember deciding to. My body decided. I went left instead of right, toward the tree line behind the football field, which was stupid and smart at the same time. Stupid because it was dark and frozen and I had no phone signal. Smart because a truck couldn't follow me through trees. I heard Hauser shout behind me. Once. Sharp. Cutting off quickly like he'd caught himself. I ran until the school disappeared behind me, until the trees were black columns in every direction, and the only light was the cold blue-white of a half-moon through bare branches. I ran until I hit the creek that gave our town its name, shallow and iced at the edges, black in the middle, and then I stopped because I had nowhere left to go. I stood there in the dark and breathed, and then I heard it. Footsteps on frozen ground, slow, deliberate, not panicked, patient. I won't tell you every detail of what happened next. I'll tell you I got out. I'll tell you that a passing truck driver named Darlene Fitch, who was lost, who had pulled off the county road to check her GPS, found a 16-year-old girl standing in her headlights at 6 p.m. on a November night, shaking, with no coat and no phone signal, and she didn't ask a single question before she locked the doors and drove. I'll tell you that when the state police investigated, they found Cassie Morrow. She was alive. I'll tell you that Mr. Voss had taught at 4 schools before Harlow Creek, that students had disappeared from 2 of them, that Deputy Carl Hauser had processed the missing person reports on both. I'll tell you that Room 14 at Harlow Creek High School has been permanently sealed. They don't use it for storage. They don't reassign it. They just keep the door shut and don't talk about what the forensics team found inside the walls. And I'll tell you this. The thing that still wakes me up at night, still finds me in the dark the way that parking lot found me in November. Mr. Voss taught us, in the very first week of class, how to read a room. Really read it. The temperature, the light, the small signs that something was wrong before the obvious signs appeared. He said it was good science. He said it was about paying attention to your environment. He called it situational awareness. He was teaching us the skills he used, and he was watching to see which of us would learn fast enough to use them back. I was the one who learned. The first thing you need to know about Carol Dietz is that she was bad at crosswords. Not charmingly bad. Genuinely, stubbornly bad in a way that annoyed people who watched her do them. She'd fill in wrong answers in pen, wouldn't even check, and then spend the rest of the morning building everything else around the wrong answer until the whole puzzle collapsed, and she'd flip it over, pour more coffee, and start the dishes. She did this every morning at the dining room table, 6:45, give or take. Always the same chair. Not because she was particular about it, but because the other chair had a wobble she'd been meaning to fix since 2019 and never got around to. That's the kind of person she was. Not a type. A person. She'd lived in the Fenwick Road house since her divorce. It was in Del Cross because that's where the house was affordable. Not because she had any feeling about the place one way or another. She had a job 40 minutes east in Hartwell. She drove it 5 days a week. She knew 2 of her neighbors by name, and one of them she actively avoided because of something that happened at a block party in 2021 that she did not want to get into. She was fine. She was just a woman, living in a house, making the best of it, until she wasn't. The gate thing happened first in mid-September. She'd gone out to check the mail, a thing she did late, usually after dinner, because the mailbox was close to the road and she didn't love the road. And on the way back, she noticed the side gate was standing open about 6 inches. She thought, wind. She latched it. She went inside. 3 days later, open again. She called her sister, who was not unhelpful but was also 800 miles away in Tempe and had 2 kids under 5 and could not reasonably be expected to absorb the full weight of a half-open gate over the phone. Her sister said the latch was probably loose. Her sister was probably right. She bought a new latch at the hardware store in Hartwell. The man at the counter sold her a sliding bolt, stainless steel, $12 and change. She put it on herself with a screwdriver and a YouTube video, and it worked fine. She stopped thinking about the gate. What she did not stop thinking about, though she did not have words for it yet, not until later, was the quality of the light. The dining room window faced east. She'd hated it when she moved in, because it meant that every morning, while she was trying to do her crossword wrong and drink her coffee, the sun came straight through the glass at an angle that hit her directly in the left eye. She'd bought a cellular shade for it. She mostly kept it half down. She doesn't know when she noticed that the shade had been moved. She's not even sure she noticed consciously. It was more that one morning she sat down and thought, that's brighter than usual. And then she thought, I must have left it up last night. And then she didn't think about it again until the same thing happened 2 weeks later, and then a third time. And by then she had started, without fully meaning to, leaving a small piece of tape on the window frame to mark where she left the shade. Every morning she checked the tape. Every 3rd or 4th morning the shade had moved. She went to the sheriff's office in person the 2nd time, after the deputy hadn't come. Stood at the desk. A woman named Rhonda took down her information on a form and said someone would follow up. Someone did not follow up. She went back a 3rd time. Different deputy. He came to the house, walked around, looked at the new bolt on the gate, looked at the cellular shade, and said, and she's still angry about this, you could hear it in her voice when she talked about it months later. He said, does anyone else have a key to the property? She said her landlord did. He said, you might want to ask him about the shade. She asked the landlord. The landlord had not been inside the house in 14 months and had the maintenance records to prove it. She did not call the sheriff's office again. November, and she started doing a thing she was embarrassed about. Before she sat down at the table each morning, she would go to the window and look out. Not dramatically, not with dread, just a quick casual check, the way you check your mirrors before you pull out of a parking spot. Just to see if anything was there. Nothing was ever there. She kept checking anyway. The crossword got worse. She started leaving entire sections blank, coming back to them, not finishing. The coffee went cold more often. Small erosions. The morning of December 11th, she sat down, looked out the window, and the gate was open. Not the side gate with the new bolt. The back gate. The one she used maybe twice a year to drag the trash cans through when the side path was icy. She got up, put on her coat, went to the back fence. The gate had a basic spring latch, the kind you flip with your thumb, and someone had pushed it past the catch point so it sat, open, just slightly, without being visible unless you were at the right angle, which she was not usually, which she was that morning. She stood there in her coat, in December, in the yard, and looked at the mud along the fence line. There were no footprints. There were marks, scraping, compression, the kind of thing that isn't diagnostic if you're a detective, but is absolutely diagnostic if it's your yard and you know the mud. that ran along the inside of the fence toward the back corner, which was directly behind the dining room window. The notebook was found on December 14th. Police, executing a search of a property 2 miles outside Delcross following an unrelated noise complaint, found it in a garden shed that was registered to a man who had no connection to her that anyone could initially identify. 163 pages, 6 months of entries, the first dated June 3rd. Each one had a time. Each one had a weather note, not a guess, specific like he'd been checking an app. Each one had a column that documented, in shorthand nobody fully decoded until the 3rd day of reading, what she was doing when he arrived, what she was doing when he left, and whether the shade was up or down. That column ran for 151 consecutive entries before it stopped. She found out about the notebook from a detective named Gus Farrell, who called her on a Tuesday while she was in the Hartwell Kroger parking lot with a bag of cat litter in her trunk. He told her what they'd found. He told her what it contained. He told her they were treating it seriously. She sat in her car for 45 minutes after that call. She didn't go back in for the second bag. The man is not currently incarcerated. The details of the legal outcome are not something she discusses in public. What she does discuss, the thing she told a reporter for the county paper, who printed it once and then the paper folded because it was that kind of paper, is that the worst part was not the notebook. The worst part was June 3rd. June 3rd was before the gate, before the shade, before she had any awareness of anything wrong. June 3rd was just a regular morning. She'd been sitting at that table, doing her crossword badly, for months before she felt it, which means the feeling wasn't a warning. The feeling came late. That's what she said to the reporter. The feeling came late. This story is part of Unheard fears, not the cases that made the front page, not the ones with press conferences and documentaries and names everyone knows, the ones that moved through quietly, through county papers that folded, through sheriff's offices that lost the paperwork, through towns that decided collectively that it was easier not to talk about it. Those are the stories we bring here. If this one stayed with you, if something in it felt familiar, or too close, or like something you've been trying to name, that's why we do this. New stories drop every week. Until then, keep the light on, and maybe check the gate.